So this is the fourth of a short series based on ideas from the Assertiveness Workbook. And in this series, I'm just defining the different styles, and there are 4 of them in the book: passive, passive-aggressive, and assertive. Now I've covered the first 3, so next is the whole point of the book, the assertive style. Now for a lot of people, the assertive style just sounds like a kind of Goldilocks middle. You know, the passive style is not enough assertiveness and the aggressive style is too much, so the assertive style must be somewhere in the middle, just right. Well, no. I think it's fundamentally different. The other 3 styles all have a couple of things in common. For one thing, none of them work very well. We'll use all of them in all of our lives, and maybe there are certain settings where any one of them might be a good thing. But fundamentally, the assertive style is more useful and more effective in more settings. Another thing has to do with stress. Think of another term for the stress response: the fight or flight response. Fight. What does that sound like? The aggressive style. Flight. Running away. Passive style. And I've said that the passive-aggressive style is really a combination of both. It's avoidant aggression, running away and being aggressive at the same time. So all 3 of the other styles tend to be emotion-driven, and they relate to the stress response. And under stress, we can find ourselves sliding into using any one of them. The assertive style is, in a way, the opposite of all of the others. It's not about giving into temptation, the temptation to strike out or avoid conflict. If anything, it's about resisting those temptations. And it almost always involves thought more than emotion. The easiest response will always be to yell or to avoid. Being assertive requires that we pull out of what we're tempted to do in the moment and look at the long view, the long picture. What's this about really? What needs to happen here? How do I want this to turn out? And then you have to think through how you communicate to serve those goals. So you may still want to be sarcastic to your lazy kid or to the coworker who still hasn't filled out last month's progress report, but you won't indulge that. You'll hold it back, and instead you'll come up with something that's actually likely to work. It almost always requires that thought. People often wonder, when will I get so good at assertiveness that it's the first thing into my head in a difficult situation? Well, could be never. Could be it'll always be a matter of saying, my first impulse is not my best. What actually am I hoping for here? How can I bring that about? In many areas of our lives, we already do this. When you're assembling IKEA furniture, for example, and it's not going well, your first impulse is always to say, just hit it, or the hell with this, I give up. And sooner or later, you learn not to do either of those things. Instead, you sit back, you chill out, and you look at the instructions again. And eventually you figure it out. Now that may always be the way that assertiveness works for you. It's the second idea, not the first idea. And it may always take thought. But with time and practice, just like assembling IKEA furniture, that process gets easier. You learn. Oh, gosh, I've had that impulse 500 times. It's never gone well. And when I sit back and try something different after some thought, it usually does go better. The temptation to start yelling or get sarcastic or be passive-aggressive or whatever, or run away and avoid, this gets weaker and weaker and weaker, and it gets easier and easier to think of an alternative. When the Assertiveness Workbook first came out, I did a lot of radio interviews about it. And they always have about, 5 to 6 minutes for the bit before the weather and traffic. So they're in a hurry. And what they always wanted to know was, what is the single main point of this book? Well, the book is 200 pages long, and mostly it's a set of tips. Do this, 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 and this. Which is the most important one? I don't know. But after a while, I realized there is a main point to the book and to learning about assertiveness. One key insight that's more important than anything else. And the reality is, I'd known it all along. You see, when you write a book like this, you usually get to pick the title. It's your book, after all. But the publisher gets a lot of input on the subtitle. The title is designed to capture people's attention, and the subtitle is supposed to say, here's what the book is actually all about. So somebody got back to me and suggested, how about this for a subtitle? How to Get Your Own Way at Work, Home, and in Relationships. And I refused. Well, I was thinking, you didn't actually read this book, did you? Because the book is not about how to win every time. Neither is assertiveness. There is no way to win every time. That's not what assertiveness is all about. It's about you counting and other people counting and finding your way to a solution that actually works. The book is based on a group therapy program on assertiveness, and that program was called Being There. It wasn't called Winning. It was about being present. I've been talking about Shakespeare's quote from As You Like It. All the world's a stage, and every man and woman merely players. In the passive style, everyone else is allowed on stage except you. In the aggressive style, you're allowed on stage and you have to shove everyone else off. In the assertive style, everyone's on stage. You're all in the play. You all count. That can sound kind of wishy-washy, but it points to the key concept about assertiveness. It's not about learning how to control other people's behavior. It's about letting go of controlling others' behavior and controlling your own behavior instead. The truth is, you cannot control other people. You can only control yourself. So assertiveness is about looking at your own role in the dance and changing that, rather than trying to manipulate everyone else. There was a woman in our group, and this is decades ago now, but it's a perfect example. And she had a son, about 17, who'd just learned to drive. And he was always borrowing the car and bringing it back with no gas in it. And she'd get angry and try to get him to fill it up every time. And he wouldn't. And it was destroying their relationship. She could see herself becoming the nagging mother she'd always sworn she would never be. And she thought she'd failed. She'd raised this kid and he was so irresponsible, and that just made her madder. She felt completely helpless. Well, the group heard all of this, and I invited them to pitch in, as one does as a group therapist, and they pointed out where the blame lay in all of this. Her. She was the problem, not the kid. Why? Because they're her keys. It's her car. She feels helpless, but it's only because she's trying to control him. Instead, she needs to control herself. So with the help of the group, she comes up with a plan. She tells her son he can borrow the car and he can bring it back with gas or without gas. His choice, right? No problem. If he brings it back with gas, he can borrow it again. If he brings it back without gas, he can also borrow it again after 2 weeks. It's tempting to say never, right? But that's the aggressive style. That's unrealistic. That's how to fail. 2 weeks instead. And she's not going to nag him or yell or look disappointed. Totally up to him. Whatever he wants to do is just fine. So your guess, what does he do? Gas or no gas? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? No gas, of course. Why not? because she has spent 17 years training him in the rules of this relationship. I say something, you do the opposite, and nothing happens. That's how it works. But this time, she sticks to her guns. She says, no problem, and puts it on the calendar 2 weeks away. And he's enraged because suddenly she's changed everything. She's not trying to control him, she's just controlling herself. And now he's the helpless one because he's trying to change her. And she waits 2 weeks and she loans him the car. And what do you think? Gas or no gas? Gas. She changed what happened, but she did it by giving up on controlling her son. She looked at her own role in the dance and she changed that. And the relationship with her son improved as a result. She wasn't nagging him anymore, or at least as much, and they got along better. Assertiveness is about controlling yourself, not anybody else. There's more to it than that, obviously, but I do think that is the core secret of assertiveness. I may have some more videos on this in the future, but let's leave it at that for the moment. If you can't wait, you can always buy the book, whatever you like. I'm not going to tell you what to do. It's not up to me. The Assertiveness Workbook is available at your local bookseller and through Amazon. The link's below.